week we've got a question from Daniel in Tumbiumbi, New South Wales. Hi, I was wondering, what do you think of the recent closure of 2K Canberra, and how will this impact the game development industry in Australia? Do you think there is any future for AAA game development down under?
Well, Daniel, it's such disappointing news. It's always sad to see a big studio close its doors and talented people lose their jobs.
And it's been a long, slow decline for big Aussie developers over the years. One by one, they've vanished from the scene, and it's especially sad when most of them were doing such good work on games that were pretty well received.
Yeah, when I started working on Good Game, there were heaps of big studios here in Australia, like Chrome, Blue Tongue, Pandemic, Team Bondi, Creative Assembly, THQ, Visceral, and I'm probably still forgetting a few, but now all those studios are gone.
What in the revolution?
I guess that just goes to show, with the way things are at the moment, AAA development in Australia just isn't really feasible. International publishers see Australia as just too far away and too expensive. I guess if it made sense to develop AAA games here, I think we'd see more publishers doing it.
Yeah, and for our AAA scene to really get back on its feet, we would at least need similar types of tax and business incentives for game development, like there are in places like Montreal, for example.
It would be great to have big AAA studios down under to provide jobs for local devs and support a strong, stable industry. But the 2K closure is by no means the end of development in Australia.
Absolutely. We've still got a vibrant indie scene, and we've got a couple of the world's best mobile developers, with Fire Monkeys and Half-Brick Studios still doing great work.
Yeah, I think it's actually a great time to be an indie dev. Almost every major game engine is free to use, and crowdfunding can let anyone with a good idea have a shot at getting a leg up and maybe even get all the funding they need. Nowadays, it's also easier to self-publish your games on just about every platform than it's ever been.
And indie devs around the world are coming up with games that rival any AAA titles in almost all regards, from their scope, originality, graphics, and even sales. But of course, making any game is still an incredibly difficult task.
Yes, and I think in general, AAA game development is especially difficult to get going.
Yeah, hundreds of people can work on just one game for years and years and years, and if it fails, the whole studio can fail. Even if it succeeds, the entire studio can risk going under.
Yeah, AAA development also requires a huge investment and is substantial risk for publishers.
But I think on that note, it's You Review time! And speaking of big AAA games, let's see what everyone thought of the latest Battlefield Hardline.
Give it the boot, Mendoza.
You know you need a warrant for that.
Play nice, boys.
Sounds good. And it looks like there's very little consensus, with scores all over the shop. At the positive end of the spectrum, we had this one from Lombax Praetorian Guard, who wrote, 11 out of 10, would run people over with couch again. 5 stars.
Tom Clark was also clearly impressed, writing, bloody brilliant, mate. 5 stars.
Also, Biggles84 here clearly enjoyed it as well, writing, what ho, chaps? I must admit a jolly guilty pleasure in this particular game. Sure, there are some weapon balancing to be done, and the usual, it wouldn't be Battlefield if the netcode wasn't up to scratch. But for some reason, I love it. The single player was stellar for Battlefield. In my eyes, nothing like having the option to say, you're nicked, squire. And if it all goes, US version of The Office, you can knock their noggins in. Rather, 4.5 stars.
You are a trip.
Then somewhere in the middle, we have Shagush, who wrote, not too bad, 3 stars.
And it seems like Guest here wasn't impressed with the story, saying, really liked the multiplayer, it's just the story was so stupid. It's like they threw common sense out the window and did what they could to add explosion, and stupid things like taking down the water tower to swim up the elevator shaft, when most elevator shafts have ladders anyway.
You know what? You're right.
2.5 stars.
Not even sure if you can flood an elevator shaft in real life. And the kid with no friends was fairly indifferent, saying, it's an alright game, but not one of my favourite Battlefields. 2 stars.
Wait, what?
Meanwhile, at the bottom of the pile, we had Cool Guy, who wasn't impressed at all and wrote, bad, 1 star.
Likewise, the inexperienced gamer wasn't a fan and said, terrible campaign, worst I've ever played, why? Dice, why? The only reason it gets half a star is for multiplayer.
Sorry to disappoint.
Half a star. Although it is worth pointing out, DICE didn't actually make this whole game, they just helped. It was developed by Visceral Games.
Don't forget, if you'd like to leave a review, you can do so on our app or via our website.